Elena Delgado had always preferred to keep her impressive cooking career a secret in the small coastal town she now called home. Most people in town just knew her as the friendly lady who volunteered at the community center's cooking class. What they didn't know was that Elena had once been at the very top of the culinary world, earning 3 Michelin stars at her famous restaurant in Madrid. Those stars were like Olympic gold medals in the cooking world. Only the very best chefs ever received them. Elena had stepped away from the spotlight about 2 years ago after a health scare made her rethink her priorities. The stress, the late nights, the constant pressure to be perfect, it had all become too much. Her doctor had been blunt. Change your life or shorten it. So she had sold her restaurant, moved to this quiet town, and found peace teaching simple. Home cooking to beginners and enthusiasts. The community center was Elena's happy place now. Her Tuesday and Thursday evening classes were always full, but not because anyone knew about her past. They came because she made cooking feel approachable and fun. Cooking isn't about showing off, she often told her students. It's about making food with love. On this particular Thursday evening, Elena was teaching her class how to make a simple paella, a traditional Spanish rice dish that reminded her of her grandmother. The classroom smelled of saffron and seafood as 20 eager students followed her instructions. The atmosphere was relaxed, with occasional laughter and the gentle clanking of pots and pans. Next door, however, was a very different scene. The advanced cooking class had a special guest teacher today, Chef Victor Moreau, whose restaurant in Barcelona had recently earned its 2nd Michelin star. Victor was known almost as much for his temper as for his food. Tall and imposing, with salt and pepper hair and intense eyes, he carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. The advanced students had been both excited and nervous about his visit. "No, no, no," Victor's voice boomed through the wall. "This is amateur work. How do you expect to create art when you can't even chop an onion properly?" Elena winced but continued teaching her class. She had worked with chefs like Victor before, talented but with egos that filled entire rooms. Suddenly, the door to her classroom burst open and Victor stormed in, followed by Paula, the apologetic-looking community center director. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, Elena," Paula said. "There seems to have been a mix-up with the equipment. Some of our molecular gastronomy tools were mistakenly placed in your room." Victor didn't wait for pleasantries. His eyes swept across Elena's classroom with obvious disdain. "So this is where they hide the real food," he said with a smirk, "while I'm trying to teach actual cuisine next door." Elena's students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She gave them a reassuring smile before addressing Victor. "We're making paella," she said simply. "You're welcome to join us." Victor laughed. "Paella. I perfected that dish when I was 12. I'm teaching a deconstructed bouillabaisse with saffron, foam and spherification techniques today. But someone has misplaced my equipment." Paula stepped between them. "Chef Moreau, I assure you we'll find everything you need. Elena, do you mind if we check your supply cabinet?" "Of course not," Elena replied, returning to her students while Victor and Paula rummaged through her supplies. "Ah, here they are," Victor exclaimed, pulling out several specialized tools. "But they're not properly maintained." He held up a culinary syringe as if it were evidence in a trial. "This has clearly been mishandled." Elena's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her voice level. "I don't use those tools in my class. They must have been placed here by mistake." Victor turned to her, really looking at her for the first time. Elena knew what he saw. A woman in her 40s wearing simple clothes, no fancy chef's jacket, teaching a basic cooking class. In his world, she was nobody. "And what exactly do you teach here? How to open cans and boil water?" he asked. A few of Elena's students gasped. One older gentleman stood up as if to defend her, but Elena gently motioned for him to sit down. "I teach people how to feed themselves and their families," she replied calmly. "Food that tastes like home." "Home cooking." Victor said the words like they tasted bad in his mouth. "How quaint. And what qualifies you to teach even that? Did you take a weekend course, perhaps?" Paula looked mortified. "Chef Moreau, Elena, is one of our most popular instructors. Popularity doesn't equal skill, Victor cut her off. Then a gleam appeared in his eye as he glanced between Elena and her students. Perhaps we should have a little demonstration. Show these beginners what real cooking looks like. Elena knew where this was heading. She'd seen his type before. Men, and yes, it was usually men, who used their talent as a weapon. In her former life, she'd have put him in his place with a few choice words that would make a seasoned sous chef blush. But she wasn't that person anymore. My students are here to learn basics, not watch a performance, she said. Not a performance, Victor corrected her. Education. In fact, he looked thoughtful for a moment, and Elena recognized the dangerous spark of a bad idea forming. Why don't you assist in my class today? I'm sure your students would benefit from seeing what they could aspire to. Elena was about to decline when she noticed Paula's expression. The community center relied on donations from wealthy patrons, and Victor's visit had been heavily promoted. Causing a scene would only hurt Paula and the center. What did you have in mind? Elena asked cautiously. Simple. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll help prepare one of my signature dishes, the deconstructed bouillabaisse I mentioned, under my guidance, of course. It was a setup. He expected her to fail, to fumble with techniques she supposedly wouldn't understand, to embarrass herself in front of both classes. In short, he wanted to put her in her place. What Victor didn't know, what almost nobody in this town knew, was that Elena had invented several of the molecular gastronomy techniques he probably used. Her restaurant in Madrid had been famous for blending traditional Spanish flavors with cutting-edge culinary science. Before her retirement, food critics had called her the alchemist of flavor and the wizard of Madrid. Paula stepped closer to Elena and whispered, "You don't have to do this." But Elena saw her students watching with concern. Some of them had come to her classes with no confidence at all, believing cooking was something only talented people could do. She had worked hard to show them that good food belonged to everyone, not just to culinary elites. Elena squared her shoulders and looked Victor directly in the eye. "I accept your challenge, Chef Moreau." Victor looked surprised, then pleased. "Excellent, let's see what you're made of." He turned to both classes. "Everyone next door, you're about to see cuisine as art." As the students began filing out, Elena's oldest student, a grandmother named Rosa, squeezed her arm and whispered, "Show him what real cooking looks like, dear." Elena smiled and whispered back, "I plan to." Paula stayed behind after the others left, looking anxious. "Elena, I am so sorry about this. I had no idea he would behave this way." "It's all right," Elena assured her. "Some chefs forget that before food was art, it was sustenance and love. Maybe today will be educational for everyone." What Paula knew, and Victor did not, was exactly who he had just challenged. Paula had recognized Elena immediately when she applied to volunteer at the center, but had respected her wish for privacy. Now, watching Elena walk calmly toward the advanced classroom, Paula almost felt sorry for the arrogant visiting chef. He had just challenged one of the greatest culinary minds in Europe to a cooking competition, and he had no idea what was coming. The advanced classroom buzzed with excitement as Elena entered. Victor had already positioned himself at the front demonstration station, arranging his ingredients with the precision of a surgeon. The room itself was much fancier than Elena's classroom, equipped with high-end stoves, specialized tools, and ingredients that cost more than what most people spend on groceries in a month. Our home cooking instructor has arrived," Victor announced, gesturing dramatically toward Elena. Some of the advanced students exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly embarrassed by their guest teacher's behavior. Elena smiled politely as she approached the front. Her students had squeezed into the back of the room looking worried for her. She gave them a reassuring wink. "Today," Victor continued, addressing the combined classes, "we will prepare a deconstructed bouillabaisse with saffron foam and molecular elements. This dish recently received a standing ovation at my restaurant in Barcelona." He paused for effect. "It's quite complex, requiring years of training to master properly, but I'm sure our assistant will do her best to keep up." He slapped a printed recipe in front of Elena. The paper was covered with complicated instructions, precise measurements, and plating diagrams that looked more like architectural blueprints than cooking directions. "You'll be preparing the seafood elements in the foam," Victor told her. "Think you can handle that?" Elena glanced at the recipe. In truth, she had created something very similar years ago, though with better balance of flavors. Victor's version was unnecessarily complicated, a common mistake among chefs trying too hard to impress. "I'll manage," she said simply, tying an apron around her waist. Victor seemed disappointed by her calm response. He'd clearly expected her to look intimidated. "Well then," he said, turning to the audience. "Let's begin. Watch closely, as every movement matters in high cuisine." He began a theatrical explanation of the dish's concept, throwing around culinary terms that made some of the beginner students' eyes glaze over. Meanwhile, Elena quietly organized her workspace, examining the seafood he'd provided. Beautiful prawns, mussels, and sea bass that deserved respect, not showmanship. As Victor continued his lecture, Elena got to work. Her hands moved with the confident memory of decades of professional cooking. She deboned the sea bass with quick, efficient strokes that would have impressed any culinary school instructor. When it came time to prepare the prawns, she didn't just clean them. She extracted the meat whole and kept the shells for the stock, a technique that took most chefs years to perfect. A few of the advanced students began to notice. One young woman with bright blue hair nudged her neighbor and whispered something, both of them watching Elena's hands with growing interest. Victor, still focused on explaining his culinary philosophy, hadn't yet realized what was happening at the second station. He reached the part of his demonstration where they needed to prepare the saffron foam, the element he'd assigned to Elena. Now, for the foam, which is quite challenging for beginners. He turned toward Elena and froze, mid-sentence. What he saw clearly shocked him. Not only had Elena prepared all the seafood elements perfectly, but she'd already begun work on the foam, using the siphon with the ease of someone who'd done it hundreds of times before, which of course she had. "You've done this before?" Victor asked, his confident voice faltering slightly. "I've made foam once or twice," Elena replied with gentle understatement as she tested the consistency with a spoon. It was perfect, light as air but packed with flavor. Victor quickly recovered his composure. "Well, good. But the timing is crucial here. The foam must be prepared just before serving or it will collapse." "Actually," Elena said softly, so only he could hear, "if you stabilize it with a touch of gelatin, just 0.25% by weight, it holds much better without affecting the mouthfeel." Victor stared at her, genuinely surprised. That was a professional-level tip, one he himself had learned from a 3-star chef in Paris. By now, the entire room was watching Elena rather than Victor. She moved with a grace and confidence that couldn't be faked. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, just the fluid movements of someone completely in their element. The blue-haired student suddenly gasped. "Oh my God," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I know who you are." The room fell silent. Victor looked confused. "You're Elena Delgado," the student continued, her voice filled with awe. "I did my culinary school thesis on your techniques." "You're a legend!" The room erupted in whispers. Even some of the beginner students recognized the name. Elena Delgado was to cooking what Beethoven was to music, a true master who had changed her field forever. Victor's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, as reality sank in, horror. He had just spent the last 30 minutes condescending to a chef who had achieved what he still dreamed of, 3 Michelin stars. Worse, he had challenged her to prepare a dish that was, compared to her own creations, relatively simple. "Is it true?" he asked Elena, his voice barely audible over the excited chatter. Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she adjusted the heat under her stock, added a pinch of espelette pepper, and tasted it thoughtfully. "It needs a touch more acidity," she said, reaching for a lemon. Only then did she look up at Victor. "Yes, I used to have a restaurant in Madrid. That was another life. Victor stood frozen, looking like a man who'd just seen a ghost. Elena took pity on him. "Shall we continue?" she asked. "The students are waiting." This jolted Victor back to the present. He glanced around at the room full of people watching this unexpected drama unfold. "Yes. Of course," he stammered, trying to regain his footing. "As I was saying about the cooking process." But it was too late. His authority in the room had evaporated. Every student, beginner and advanced alike, was now focused on Elena. One of the world's greatest chefs was cooking right in front of them, and nobody wanted to miss a moment of it. Victor made a valiant attempt to continue his demonstration, but his previously commanding presence had diminished considerably. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he worked. Elena noticed his discomfort and did something unexpected. She began asking him questions about his techniques, treating him as a respected colleague rather than continuing the competition he had started. It was a generous gesture that allowed him to save face. "Chef Moreau," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm interested in your approach to the basil oil. Do you prefer blanching before blending?" Victor looked at her with surprise, then gratitude as he recognized her olive branch. "Yes, blanching helps preserve the color," he replied, his voice finding its confidence again. "Though I use ice water for exactly 15 seconds afterward to stop the cooking process immediately." Elena nodded appreciatively. "An excellent technique. Would you show the students?" For the next hour, what had begun as an uncomfortable confrontation transformed into an extraordinary collaborative cooking demonstration. The two chefs, one at the peak of his career and the other a semi-retired legend, worked side by side, each bringing their own perspective and expertise to the dish. The students watched in amazement as the bouillabaisse came together. Elena subtly improved upon Victor's original concept, adding a depth of flavor that transformed it from merely impressive to truly memorable. She showed the beginners that even advanced techniques were just extensions of basic principles, while Victor, recovering his composure, demonstrated the precision that had earned him his own considerable success. When it came time to plate the dish, Elena stepped back, giving Victor the honor. His hands had stopped shaking, and he arranged the elements with artistic precision. The clear seafood consommé, the perfectly cooked fish, the light as air foam, and the molecular caviar made from concentrated fish stock. The final result was stunning, a dish that honored tradition while embracing innovation. When they invited the students to taste it, the room filled with sounds of appreciation. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," Rosa, Elena's oldest student, declared after taking a spoonful. "And to think it's just fancy fish soup." This broke the remaining tension in the room, and everyone, including Victor, laughed. As the class came to an end and students gathered around to ask questions, Victor pulled Elena aside. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I behaved terribly." Elena smiled. "Cooking is a humbling art. We all need reminding sometimes that there's always more to learn." "Why didn't you tell me who you were right away?" he asked. Elena looked over at her regular students who were now chatting excitedly with the advanced class, barriers broken down through their shared experience. "Because in my classroom, it doesn't matter who I was," she explained. "What matters is the joy of cooking, whether you're making a simple paella or..." She gestured to their elaborate creation, this masterpiece. Victor looked at her with new respect. "I came here thinking I had nothing to learn from a community cooking class. I've never been more wrong." As the students began to clean up, still buzzing with excitement about what they'd witnessed, Victor and Elena stood together, two chefs from different worlds finding unexpected common ground in the kitchen that had almost become a battlefield. Word quickly spread throughout the community center about what had happened in the cooking class. By the time Elena and Victor had finished cleaning up the kitchen, a small crowd of curious staff members had gathered outside the classroom, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous chef who had been hiding in plain sight all this time. "I haven't seen this much excitement since we hosted that minor celebrity from that baking show last year," Paula whispered to Elena, as they packed away the last of the equipment. And even then, people weren't this starstruck. Elena sighed. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. I suppose my quiet life in this town is over now. Is it really such a bad thing for people to know who you are? Paula asked gently. Before Elena could answer, the blue-haired student who had recognized her approached, clutching a worn cookbook to her chest. Elena recognized it immediately. It was her first published work, Traditional Spanish Cooking with Modern Techniques, from nearly 15 years ago. Chef Delgado, the young woman said, her voice trembling slightly with nervousness. My name is Lily. I'm studying culinary arts at the regional college, and your book, it changed my life. Would you mind signing it? Elena smiled warmly at her. Of course, Lily. She took the book, noticing how dog-eared and stained the pages were, signs of a cookbook that had been used and loved. You've been cooking from this a lot, I see. Every recipe at least twice, Lily admitted with a shy smile. Your chapter on balancing flavors is what made me want to become a chef. As Elena signed the book, she asked, What kind of chef do you want to be, Lily? The young woman thought for a moment. Honestly, I want to open a small place that makes people happy. Nothing fancy, just good food that means something. Elena felt an unexpected lump in her throat. That's the best reason to cook, she said, handing the book back. Victor, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. You know, I could put in a word at my restaurant in Barcelona. We sometimes take interns. He glanced at Elena. If Chef Delgado thinks you have potential, that's good enough for me. Lily's eyes widened. Really? That would be wow. Elena watched this interaction with mixed feelings. Just hours ago, Victor had been the embodiment of everything she had walked away from. The ego, the showing off, the pressure. Now he was, offering a young chef a chance, and she couldn't quite sort out if his motives were genuine or if this was just another performance. The moment was interrupted as more students approached, asking questions about technique, requesting photos, and sharing how much they'd enjoyed the unexpected demonstration. Both Elena's regular students and the advanced class members mingled together. The artificial divide between basic and advanced cooking suddenly seemed to have disappeared. Rosa, the grandmother from Elena's class, pushed her way through to Victor. Young man, she said, looking up at him with her hands on her hips, that foam thing you made was very impressive, but I still think Elena's regular paella has more soul. Victor looked startled for a moment, then laughed genuinely. You might be right, he admitted. Sometimes we chefs get so caught up in innovation that we forget what matters most, how the food makes people feel. Elena watched this exchange with surprise. Perhaps there was more to Victor than she had initially thought. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Paula approached Elena and Victor with an excited gleam in her eye. I have a proposition for both of you, she said. What would you think about doing a special collaborative class next week? We could open it to the public, charge a bit extra, and raise funds for the center's food outreach program. Victor looked at Elena. I'm scheduled to be in town for another 10 days, he said. I'd be honored to collaborate with Chef Delgado if she's willing. All eyes turned to Elena. This was the moment she could politely decline and try to return to her quiet life. But something had shifted during the cooking demonstration. For the first time in years, she had felt the old spark, the joy of creating, at the highest level, of teaching someone who truly wanted to learn. One class, she agreed finally, but no foam, no spherification, nothing fancy. Let's teach something everyone can make at home, but make it extraordinary through technique and quality ingredients. Victor nodded, looking thoughtful. Back to basics, but with excellence. I like it. After everyone else had left, Elena and Victor found themselves alone in the classroom. The silence between them was awkward at first, both of them aware of how differently their evening had turned out than either had expected. Would you like to get a coffee? Victor asked suddenly. Or maybe something stronger? I think we both could use it after today. Elena considered declining. She was tired, and the day had been emotionally draining. but curiosity won out. What had made someone so talented become so arrogant? And what had caused his sudden change in attitude? There's a small place by the harbor, she suggested. Nothing fancy, but they make good sangria. 20 minutes later, they were seated at a corner table in a modest seaside bar. The place was nearly empty on a Thursday night, just a few locals watching a football match on a small television. Nobody paid any attention to the two world-class chefs sitting by the window. "So," Elena said after they'd received their drinks, "what brought you to our little community center in the first place? Surely you have better things to do than teach home cooks how to make fancy foam." Victor swirled his sangria before answering. "Publicity," he admitted with surprising honesty. "My restaurant is up for its 3rd star this year. The reviewers are coming in October." Elena nodded. She knew all too well the pressure of those reviews. "And how's it looking?" Victor's confident facade cracked slightly. "I don't know. That's the hell of it. You never know. You just keep pushing, keep trying to impress, keep wondering if it's enough." He took a long drink. "Was it like that for you too?" Elena thought back to her own journey. "Yes and no. I wanted the stars, of course. Everyone does. But somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started cooking in the first place." "Which was?" "To make people happy," she said simply. "To create something that brings joy and comfort. My grandmother taught me to cook, and she never measured anything or worried about presentation. She just cooked with love." Victor was quiet for a moment. "My first cooking job was at a small family restaurant in a village outside Barcelona," he shared. "The chef there couldn't even read, but he could taste a sauce and tell you exactly what it needed. No fancy techniques, just perfect flavors." He shook his head. "Somehow I lost that along the way." "It's easy to lose in the world of high cuisine," Elena said. "The pressure, the competition, the constant need to innovate, it changes you." "Is that why you left?" Victor asked. "After achieving what every chef dreams of?" Elena hadn't spoken about her decision to many people, but something about the vulnerability Victor was showing made her willing to share. "Partly," she admitted. "I had health problems, high blood pressure, anxiety attacks, trouble sleeping. My doctor said it was stress." She looked out at the dark sea beyond the window. "But even before that, I could feel something was wrong. The joy was gone. I was cooking for critics and stars, not for people." Victor nodded slowly. "I feel that sometimes. The fear that if I stop pushing, stop trying to impress, I'll lose everything I've worked for." "And what would happen if you did lose it all?" Elena asked gently. "If the 3rd star never came, or even if you lost the ones you have?" Victor looked genuinely frightened by the thought. "I don't know. My whole identity is tied to those stars." "Mine was too," Elena said. "Until it wasn't." She gestured around the simple bar. "And look, the world didn't end. I still cook. I still teach. I just do it differently now." They talked for hours, swapping stories about impossible restaurant owners, ridiculous customer requests, and the unique challenges of leading a kitchen. As the night went on, Victor's arrogance fell away completely, revealing a man who was both incredibly talented and deeply insecure. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victor said, as they were finishing their second round of drinks. Elena nodded. "Do you miss it? The restaurant, the stars being at the top?" It was a question Elena had asked herself many times over the past 2 years. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not the stress or the pressure, but the creativity, the team, the feeling when everything goes perfectly during a service. Yes, I miss that." "So why not go back? Open a new place, but do it differently this time?" Elena hadn't seriously considered returning to professional cooking. She had made her peace with her quieter life. But Victor's question stirred something in her that she had been trying to ignore. "Maybe someday," she said finally, "but not for the stars or the recognition. It would have to be on my own terms." Victor raised his glass. "To cooking on our own terms," he said. "Whatever that means for each of us." As they walked back toward the town center where they'd both parked, Victor asked, "So what should we teach in this collaborative class?" Elena thought for a moment. "Something that honors both our styles. Perhaps a traditional dish elevated with some modern techniques, but only where they actually improve the flavor, not just for show. I'd like that, Victor said. Then, with a hint of his old confidence, but without the arrogance, he added, and I guarantee it will be the best cooking class this town has ever seen. Elena laughed. That's setting the bar pretty low, but yes, I think we can give them something special. They reached Elena's car first, and an awkward moment followed. Were they friends now? Colleagues? The evening had transformed their relationship into something neither could have predicted. Thank you, Victor said finally, for not humiliating me today. You could have, and I would have deserved it. We all have bad days, Elena replied. And good ones. Today turned out to be both, I think. As she drove home that night, Elena found herself thinking about cooking in a way she hadn't for years. Not just as a hobby or a way to teach others, but as her life's passion. Perhaps there was a middle ground between the stress-filled world she'd left behind and the quiet life she'd built. Perhaps it was time to find out. News about the unexpected collaboration between Elena and Victor spread through the town like wildfire. By Monday morning, Paula was fielding calls from people as far as 50 miles away who wanted to attend the special cooking class. What had started as a simple fundraising idea was quickly turning into the biggest event the community center had ever hosted. We've had to move it to the main hall, Paula told Elena when she arrived for her regular Tuesday class. We've already sold over 100 tickets and people are still calling. Elena felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She hadn't cooked for a crowd this size since leaving her restaurant. Have you told Victor about this yet? I called his hotel this morning, Paula said. He seemed thrilled about the turnout. He's even arranged for some special ingredients to be shipped in. Elena wasn't surprised. Victor was still Victor, always looking to impress. But their conversation at the seaside bar had revealed a more human side to him, one that she found herself thinking about more than she'd expected. Her regular Tuesday class was unusually full, with several new faces joining. Everyone wanted to learn from the famous chef who had been hiding among them. Elena did her best to keep things normal, teaching a simple Spanish tortilla recipe as planned, but she could feel the difference in how people looked at her now. Chef, is it true you once cooked for the royal family? A new student asked during a break. Just once, Elena admitted. And the Queen sent her compliments, though I suspect she was just being polite. And did you really invent that technique for making vegetable purees that keep their bright colors? Another new student asked. Co-invented, Elena corrected. With a colleague in Valencia. It was actually a happy accident during a very busy service. She found herself sharing stories she hadn't told in years, remembering moments from her former life that had once brought her such joy. The class ran 40 minutes over as everyone hung on her every word. After class, Elena checked her phone and found a message from Victor. Need to discuss menu for Saturday. Dinner tonight? I found a good place. The good place turned out to be the most expensive restaurant in the area, a beachfront establishment that catered to tourists and wealthy weekend visitors from the city. Elena felt slightly uncomfortable as they were led to the best table. Victor had clearly mentioned who they were when making the reservation. The chef here wants to meet us after dinner, Victor told her as they settled in. He's a fan of your work, apparently. Elena nodded politely, though the idea of being treated like a celebrity still felt strange after 2 years of anonymity. Let's focus on our class first. Have you thought about what we should teach? Victor had come prepared. He pulled out a small notebook filled with ideas, each one more elaborate than the last. I was thinking we could do a tasting menu concept. 5 small courses that build on each other, each demonstrating different techniques. Elena looked through his suggestions. They were impressive, certainly, but far too complex for a community cooking class. Victor, remember our audience. These aren't professional chefs or even culinary students. They're home cooks who want to learn something special but achievable. Victor's face fell slightly. You're right. I got carried away. He flipped to a new page in his notebook. What did you have in mind? I was thinking about what we discussed, traditional dishes elevated with modern techniques, but only where they improve the flavor. She paused as the waiter brought their drinks. What about paella? It's something people think they know, but there are so many ways to make it special. Victor considered this. Paella could work. We could teach proper rice selection and preparation, show them how to make a real sofrito base. His eyes lit up as ideas began to flow. And I could demonstrate my technique for getting that perfect carrot at the bottom without burning it. Exactly. Elena nodded. It's familiar enough that people won't be intimidated, but with our guidance they can make something truly exceptional. They spent the next hour refining their plan, finding a balance between Elena's focus on fundamental techniques and Victor's flair for elevation. By the time their main courses arrived, they had outlined a class that would be both educational and entertaining. The food at the restaurant was good but not exceptional, at least not to their trained palates. They both found themselves dissecting each dish, discussing what they would have done differently. The sauce needs more acidity, Victor murmured after tasting his fish. And they've overcooked the vegetables, Elena added, pushing aside a limp piece of asparagus. They caught each other's eye and smiled, sharing the private language of professional chefs. It felt comfortable, this mutual understanding that came from years of experience. As promised, the restaurant's chef came out to meet them after their meal. He was young, perhaps 30, and visibly nervous to be meeting two culinary legends. It's such an honor, he gushed, shaking their hands repeatedly. I studied your techniques in culinary school, Chef Delgado, and Chef Moreau, your restaurant has been my inspiration for years. They chatted politely, offering gentle encouragement rather than criticism of the meal. As they were leaving, Victor suggested that the young chef should attend their class on Saturday. We'd be happy to have you, he said. Every chef should remember to be a student sometimes. Outside in the cool evening air, Elena found herself reluctant to end the night. Shall we walk for a bit? The beach is beautiful this time of evening, Victor agreed, and they strolled along the shore, their conversation drifting from professional matters to more personal topics. Victor spoke about his childhood in a small town outside Barcelona, where his mother ran a bakery. That's where I first fell in love with food, he explained. Watching her create something beautiful and delicious from just flour, water, and thyme, it seemed like magic to me. And yet you chose cooking over baking, Elena observed. Victor laughed. My mother said I was too impatient for baking. She was right. I couldn't stand waiting for dough to rise or custards to set. I wanted immediate results, the sizzle and flash of the stovetop. That explains a lot about your cooking style, Elena teased. All those dramatic flourishes. What about you? Victor asked. How did you start? Elena told him about growing up in her grandmother's kitchen in a small village near Madrid. She cooked everything from scratch, using vegetables from her garden and fish that the local men caught each morning. Nothing was measured, nothing was written down. She just knew by touch and smell and taste. And yet you became known for precision and innovation, Victor noted. That's quite a journey. I wanted to preserve those traditional flavors while finding new ways to present them, Elena explained. I was afraid those old recipes would be forgotten in the rush toward international cuisine. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of waves filling the space between them. Elena realized that it had been a long time since she'd felt this kind of connection with someone who truly understood her world. Can I ask you something personal? She ventured. Of course. Why are you really here, teaching at a small community center? It can't just be for publicity. Victor was quiet for a moment, watching the waves. My restaurant is being reviewed next month, he finally said. Not just for the 3rd star, but to keep the stars we already have. There have been rumors that we might be downgraded. He kicked at the sand. The stress was getting to me. My sous chef suggested I take a week off, do something completely different. And how's that working out for you? Elena asked, with a small smile. Not exactly as planned, Victor admitted, smiling back. I thought I'd come teach a few basic classes, feel superior, and go home refreshed. Instead, I've been humbled, challenged, and... He paused, looking directly at her. Inspired. The word hung in the air between them, carrying more meaning than either was ready to acknowledge. What will you do if they take away a star? Elena asked gently. Victor sighed. Before this week, I would have said it would destroy me. Now, I'm not so sure. You've shown me there's more than one way to be a chef, to have meaning in the culinary world. Just to be clear, Elena said, I'm not suggesting everyone should walk away like I did. That was my path. Yours might be different. I know, Victor nodded. But it helps to see that there's life after whatever happens. They had reached a small pier that jutted out into the water. By unspoken agreement, they walked to the end of it and sat down, legs dangling above the gentle waves. The moon was rising, casting a silver path across the dark water. I've been thinking about cooking professionally again, Elena said suddenly. The admission surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Victor. Really? What changed? Our cooking demonstration, for one thing. It reminded me how much I love creating at that level. And our conversation afterward made me realize that maybe I don't have to choose between extremes, either the stress-filled 3-star world or complete retirement. What are you considering? Something small, Elena said thoughtfully. Maybe 20 seats, serving food that means something to me without worrying about critics or trends. Just honest cooking at the highest level I can achieve. That sounds perfect, Victor said with genuine enthusiasm. Would you do it here? Elena looked around at the moonlit beach and the twinkling lights of the small town behind them. Maybe. I've grown fond of this place. It's a good town, Victor. Agreed. I can see why you chose it. They sat in companionable silence watching the moonlight on the water. Elena was surprised by how comfortable it felt to be with Victor now. How quickly their relationship had evolved from antagonism to something approaching friendship. Whatever you decide, Victor said finally. I'd be honored to eat at your table again someday, and I at yours, Elena replied. Preferably when you're cooking for joy, not for stars. Victor laughed softly. I'm starting to think those might be the same thing. As they walked back toward town, their conversation turned to practical matters, about Saturday's class. But something had shifted between them, a mutual respect that went beyond professional courtesy. Two chefs at different points in their journeys, each with something to teach the other. This is going to be quite a show on Saturday, Victor said as they reached their cars. Yes, Elena agreed. But let's make sure the learning comes first, before the showing off. Victor placed his hand over his heart in mock offense. Me? Show off? Never. They both laughed, knowing full well that a certain amount of performance was inevitable when two passionate chefs got together. The trick would be channeling that energy into something that truly benefited their students. Until Saturday, then, Elena said. Until Saturday, Victor echoed, looking at her with a warmth that hadn't been there before. As Elena drove home, she found herself looking forward to the class with an excitement she hadn't felt in years. Something new was beginning, though exactly what she wasn't yet sure. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, sunshine warming the coastal town after a week of cloudy skies. It seemed even nature was cooperating for the big event. Elena arrived at the community center 2 hours early to find Victor already there, meticulously organizing ingredients and equipment. I couldn't sleep, he admitted when Elena commented on his early arrival. I haven't been this nervous about cooking since my first night as head chef. Elena understood completely. Despite having performed cooking demonstrations hundreds of times in her career, she too felt butterflies in her stomach. This wasn't about impressing critics or earning stars. This was about sharing something meaningful with people who genuinely wanted to learn. They're going to love it, she assured him, rolling up her sleeves to help with the preparations. They had decided on a collaborative approach for the class. They would take turns demonstrating different elements of their elevated paella, explaining not just what they were doing, but why each technique mattered. The goal was to teach principles that could be applied to any dish, not just follow a recipe. By 9:30, the main hall of the community center had been transformed. A demonstration kitchen had been set up at the front, with cameras projecting onto large screens so everyone could see the details of their work. Chairs had been arranged in a semicircle with small tables between them for note-taking. This looks like a TV cooking show, Elena remarked, surveying the setup. Paula has outdone herself, Victor agreed. As if summoned by her name, Paula hurried, looking both excited and frazzled. We've sold 142 tickets, she reported. That's almost 3 times our usual attendance for special events, and the local newspaper is here to cover it. Elena felt a momentary panic at the thought of being in the news. She had carefully avoided publicity since leaving her restaurant, but it was too late to back out now, and truthfully, she didn't want to. The past week had awakened something in her that had been dormant for too long. Just make sure they focus on the community center and the fundraising, she told Paula. This is about your programs, not about us. Paula smiled knowingly. Of course, though I can't promise people aren't interested in the famous chefs too. As 10 o'clock approached, people began filling the hall. Elena recognized her regular students, many of whom waved excitedly. Victor's advanced class students were there too, along with dozens of unfamiliar faces from neighboring towns. In the front row, Elena spotted Lily, the blue-haired culinary student, notebook already open and pen poised to capture every detail. At precisely 10, Paula stepped to the microphone to introduce them. Ladies and gentlemen, we are incredibly fortunate today to welcome 2 extraordinary chefs who have agreed to share their knowledge with us. Please join me in welcoming Chef Elena Delgado and Chef Victor Moreau. The applause was thunderous. Elena and Victor stepped forward, both wearing simple aprons rather than formal chef's whites, a deliberate choice to make the class feel more accessible. Good morning, everyone, Elena began, her voice steadier than she expected. Thank you all for coming today. Chef Moreau and I are excited to cook with you. That's right, Victor added, stepping forward with a smile. Today isn't about fancy restaurant food or intimidating techniques. It's about understanding how simple ingredients can become extraordinary with the right approach. They launched into their demonstration, beginning with the fundamentals of good paella. Elena showed how to properly prepare the sofrito, the aromatic base of onions, garlic, and peppers that forms the foundation of the dish. The secret is patience, she explained, stirring the mixture as it slowly caramelized. Many cooks rush this step, but these few extra minutes of attention transform the entire dish. Victor then demonstrated how to select and prepare the perfect rice for paella. The rice isn't just a vehicle for other flavors, he explained, showing how each grain should be coated with oil before adding the broth. It should have its own character and texture. The audience was captivated, scribbling notes and occasionally murmuring in appreciation when a particularly clever technique was shown. What made the demonstration special wasn't just the individual skills of Elena and Victor, but the way they worked together, complementing each other's styles, occasionally disagreeing but always respectfully, showing that there was rarely just one right way in cooking. Chef Delgado prefers her paella with a thinner layer of rice, Victor explained at one point. While I like mine a bit thicker, both are authentic. It's about what brings you joy when you eat it. Elena nodded, adding, cooking rules are guidelines, not laws. Understanding why they exist lets you break them creatively when you choose to. As they cooked, they shared stories from their careers, kitchen disasters that taught valuable lessons, mentors who had shaped their approaches to food, and moments of culinary revelation. The audience laughed at Victor's tale of accidentally serving a famous food critic a completely burned dish early in his career. He said it was boldly rustic. I think he was being kind. And they grew quiet as Elena described the first time she truly understood her grandmother's cooking philosophy. She told me, Elena, when someone eats your food, they're not just tasting ingredients. They're tasting your care, your attention, your love. Never cook when you're angry. The food will know. By the time they reached the final stages of the paella, the hall was filled with the intoxicating aromas of saffron, seafood, and perfectly toasted rice. The crucial moment had arrived, achieving the socarat, the crispy bottom layer that is the hallmark of great paella. This is where courage comes in, Victor explained, raising the heat slightly. You need to listen to the rice. It will tell you when it's forming that perfect crust. The room fell silent as everyone strained to hear the gentle crackling sound from the pan. Victor placed his hand on Elena's shoulder as they both watched intently. It was a moment of pure culinary tension. 1 second too long and the bottom would burn. Too short and the magical texture would never develop. Now, Elena said quietly, and Victor immediately removed the pan from the heat. They let it rest for several minutes before the big reveal. When they finally turned the pan over onto a large serving platter, there was an audible gasp from the Biram audience. The paella was a vision of vibrant colors: golden rice, bright red peppers, green beans, and perfectly cooked seafood. And at the edges, the coveted dark, crispy sauerkraut glistened invitingly. "That," Victor said with genuine reverence, "is perfect." They invited everyone to come forward in small groups to taste the dish. The reactions were everything they had hoped for: expressions of delight, closed eyes to better savor the flavors, and murmurs of appreciation. Lily, the culinary student, approached them as the crowd began to disperse. "I've changed my mind about what kind of chef I want to be," she told them earnestly. "I still want to make people happy with food, but I also want to aim higher, to create experiences people remember like you both do." "Those aren't mutually exclusive goals," Elena told her warmly. "The best cooking does both." As the event wound down, Paula announced that they had raised over $5,000 for the community center's food outreach program, enough to fund it for the next 6 months. The applause that followed was heartfelt, with many attendees already asking when the next special class would be held. "That depends on our guest chef's schedule," Paula said, looking at Victor. "Chef Moreau, might we tempt you to return someday?" Victor glanced at Elena before answering. "I'd be delighted to, schedule permitting, though I think you already have an exceptional teacher right here." The cleanup afterward was companionable, with both chefs falling into the rhythm that comes from years of kitchen experience. They worked mostly in silence, tired but satisfied with what they had accomplished. "We make a good team," Victor said as they packed the last of the equipment. "Surprisingly, yes," Elena agreed with a small smile. "I wouldn't have predicted that a week ago," Victor laughed. "Neither would I. I was quite the arrogant fool, wasn't I?" "You had your moments," Elena teased. Then, more seriously, she added, "But you showed you could learn and grow. That's rare in our profession." They finished cleaning and stood in the empty hall, both reluctant to end the day. The past week had been unexpected in so many ways, changing both of their perspectives on cooking and perhaps on life. "I leave tomorrow," Victor said finally. "Back to Barcelona, back to reality." Elena nodded, feeling a surprising pang of sadness. "Back to preparing for those reviewers." "Yes, but with a different mindset now. Whatever happens with the stars, I'm going to remember what we taught today, that cooking should bring joy both to the chef and to those who eat the food." "That's a good lesson to take back," Elena said. "Perhaps the most important one." They walked outside together into the late afternoon sunshine. The day was still beautiful, the town peaceful around them. In just 1 week, this small coastal community had witnessed something extraordinary, a collision of culinary worlds that had transformed into an unexpected harmony. "What about you?" Victor asked as they reached the parking lot. "Any decisions? About returning to professional cooking?" Elena looked out toward the sea, considering her answer. "I'm thinking about it seriously now. Something small, something true to who I am and what I believe about food." "Here in this town?" "I think so. It's become home." She smiled at him. "And who knows, maybe someday you could come cook with me again. Not as a celebrity guest chef, just as a friend who loves food." "I'd like that very much," Victor said softly. As they said their goodbyes, there was a moment of awkwardness. Should they shake hands? Embrace? In the end, they did both, a professional handshake that turned into a warm hug. "Thank you," Victor whispered, "for teaching me something I didn't know I needed to learn." "Thank you for reminding me of something I'd forgotten," Elena replied. 6 months later, a small restaurant opened in the coastal town. It had just 20 seats, a menu that changed daily based on what was fresh and inspiring, and a chef who cooked with both technical precision and boundless joy. The sign above the door read simply, Elena's. There were no Michelin inspectors, no critics from fancy food magazines, just people who loved good food, served with care and attention. Some evenings, Elena would come out from the kitchen and sit with her guests, sharing stories and the philosophy behind each dish. On opening night, a large bouquet of flowers arrived with a card that read, "To cooking on our own terms. Congratulations, my friend." 2 weeks later, news arrived from Barcelona. Victor's restaurant had not only kept its 2 stars but had been awarded the coveted 3rd. The reviewing committee had specifically noted the soulful evolution of his cooking, the way technical mastery now served emotion rather than the other way around. When Elena called to congratulate him, Victor laughed. "The funny thing is, I don't care as much as I thought I would," he told her. "Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what we achieved, but I find myself more excited about the new community cooking school we're opening next to the restaurant. We're calling it From Stars to Hearth. I hope you don't mind that I borrowed your philosophy." "Not at all," Elena replied. "Good ideas deserve to spread." They spoke often after that, sharing new recipes, restaurant challenges, and the ongoing journey of finding balance in their work. What had begun as an accidental clash of egos had transformed into something neither could have predicted, a friendship built on mutual respect, shared passion, and the understanding that at its heart, cooking was never about showing off or earning accolades. It was about creating moments of joy, one plate at a time, and in kitchens both grand and modest. That was exactly what they continued to do,